We are live. Yay.
Yay!
So this is Ann Meg. She wrote the first chapter in the Brilliant Biz Breakthroughs for Small Business Owners. And I'm really delighted to meet you. I've enjoyed reading your chapter, and your chapter is called The Financial Freedom Trail. So we are celebrating a fabulous book launch today. And there's so much good going on with this. And as I've been able, I spend a lot of time in working on these chapters, making sure everything's formatted, everything's good. But when you get to meet the actual person that wrote it,
Right.
it gets even better. So I'm so delighted to meet you, and tell us about you and your journey to be able to write a chapter called The Financial Freedom Trail.
Sure. So I am in my day job. I am a wealth advisor with Ellen Becker Investment Group. So what I do is I do financial planning, and I help individuals make sure they get to retirement the way they want to get to retirement. But I've had a long and probably a little bit different journey than most financial people have. I started off in public accounting, and so you name it, and I've done it from corporate controller to writing all those 10Ks and Qs that you get with stocks. Like, I've done it all. And so I have, a pretty unique background, been able to do a lot of different things. And so it got me to this point that I know that I have a lot of wisdom to share and a lot of knowledge that I've learned over the last 20 years. And so when I was approached for this opportunity of writing in the book, I kind of leaped at it because I thought it was a great way of using some of the information I've gathered to put it in a very simple, easy to understand way for individuals. And I thought a book was a great way to do that.
It is. A book is it's a tool. It's a fabulous tool for exposure, for being able to share your wisdom. It's not the end all be all, but it certainly is a fabulous tool to be able to bring your wisdom to the world.
Yeah, exactly.
So talk to us about the Financial Freedom Trail. And I know you talked about waterfalls in your chapter. Explain what that is so that the reader knows what they're going to gain from your chapter.
Sure. So I'll give you a little background on my chapter because it's set up a little bit differently than most would expect when they're looking at something, especially when you were talking about profitability. And so I detailed a journey, a story of somebody who's starting a climb up a mountain. And so I've associated a climb up a mountain with the small business owner starting the journey on starting their business and what they need to know. And so one of the topics we talk about in there is the cash flowing model. And you can think of that as a waterfall. So when you're looking at waterfalls going over the edge, you can think of that as your cash flow. And so there's 3 different types of waterfalls that you need to really pay attention to. And I think we get 2 of them right, but there's a 3rd one that most people either forget about or it really comes up quickly and they just, they're falling over that waterfall versus enjoying it. Yeah, exactly. So in the book, I write about those and just give, kind of touch on what those are and why they're important.
So what is the first waterfall?
So the first waterfall is talking about just your business. So cash comes in and you need to use it for your business. You need to use it for marketing, supplies, your product. And so that's the first waterfall that most individuals do deal with. The one that kind of sneaks up on individuals then would be the second one, and that's the taxes. So a lot of times, I know, a lot of talk too about that.
That caught me.
But that's the one that if we pay attention to it and we set it up correctly, it doesn't have to be like going over the edge of a waterfall. So that's the second one. The third one is your growth and yourself. So a lot of entrepreneurs forget to pay themselves or don't feel they can pay themselves if they're starting up. But that's an important part of the whole plan and making sure that your business will survive 3, 5, 10 years from now.
But it's also, that one, it also has to do kind of in a almost self-worth type of thing.
Yeah. And a lot of times we put so much in our business that we might not plan for the future. So someone might pay themselves, but they're not funding their retirement plan, or they're not funding a goal of expanding their business, or they're not thinking about how they can sell their business off in the future. And so that's where you really have to make sure you focus on yourself as a business owner so that you can be successful, because this is your baby. You're building it up. It's really what you tie your identity around. And if you aren't thinking about yourself during this process, that's where I see a lot of small businesses fail within the first couple of years.
Oh, I think especially with new businesses, there's so many moving parts, and sometimes you get almost this tunnel vision. Yep. And first is get the clients and keep the clients happy, and all the moving parts with all of that. So you have a financial freedom survival kit. What does that entail?
So a lot of times when we go on a hike, we know that there's a checklist of things that we need. So when you go on a hike, you need your compass and a map, and you might need your water. And we want to take that same philosophy to the small business owner. So the small business owner needs to have their checklist as well. So do they have their map? Do they have their compass? Which would be, do you have your business plan? Do you know your why statement? When we're talking about, do you have enough water? It's, do you have an emergency fund? And so especially since, COVID has really brought that into, plain sight for a lot of small business owners is, did you have enough water when you started the journey? Did you have enough in your emergency fund when you started to be able to handle some of the things that come along as you're trying to build your business?
Oh, that's one of the things that so many times we don't consider. Mm-hmm. And in speaking with a lot of business owners, that's something that's not even there in their field of scope, because they're still in survival mode and they're not into the planning. But when they do it the right way, you mentioned the why statement. Mm-hmm. And I think that if we know our why, we can stay on task so much better than if we're just kind of going full steam ahead trying to make ends meet and do all the things we need to do. And a lot of times when people start a business, that's the way it is.
Yeah, and you bring up the good point with the why statement too. And a lot of times we don't have a solid enough why statement when we start something. So I don't know if you've heard about asking why 7 times. So it's really just digging deep. Like, I want to start a business because I want to be successful. Why? Well, I want to provide for my family. Why? And just really getting deep so that you find what's at the core of really doing what you're doing, and either starting your business, consulting, being a service, but really, why is that so important? Because you want that passion behind it so that no matter what, you always have that in the forefront, and that you're doing this for a good reason, maybe even something higher than yourself.
Very much. And oftentimes when I first meet my authors, that's the first question is, why? Why are you doing this? Because I always say that, whether it's a small business or writing a book, it's not for the faint of heart. It takes a lot of digging deep and really stick-to-itiveness. And, if they don't, and not clear on their why, then I ask them, why are you doing this if you don't know your why?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Interesting. So what words of advice would you give? I had some other pieces outlined in my from your chapter, but what words of advice would you give somebody reading your chapter who's on this journey and they know they haven't connected all the dots yet? What would you suggest they do?
So a big part of my story, it's talking about somebody who's on the journey, but they also have a guide with them. And I think that's really important, that as you're going through this journey, you either have a coach that you can lean on, you have a mentor, you have somebody who's been through it, because a lot of times you don't know all the pieces and you don't know what you don't know. And so having that guide becomes invaluable, because it is the person who sees the cliff before you do. So it's just that person who says, have you thought about this? Do we have everything on our checklist? Here's something else to think about. Asking you that why question 7 times. So having that person that you can lean on, because like you said, we get so laser focused Either it's because it's exciting and there's a lot of things going on, or because you become successful and people start pulling you in all these different directions. And so having that coach and that guide to really bring you back or help you focus on what you need to focus on, it's just indispensable.
And I think that there's probably a lot of business owners out there that wish they had had this advice a long time ago.
Right? Like, oh, why didn't I think of that?
Why didn't I know that?
Right, right, exactly.
Well, I think that, for myself, I have tapped in, especially the last couple of years, tapped into a lot more coaching because but I think, maybe COVID for a lot of people has brought this front and center to what we're experiencing, because for so many it's changed the very fiber of the way we think, the way we do things, the way we connect. And I'm always amazed to think that if COVID had happened 15 years ago, where would we be? We have all these wonderful tool sets where we can still grow, we can still connect. We're not isolated. I mean, we may be stuck in our homes or whatever, but we're not isolated. We have these ways to connect, and also to learn and take advantage of the massive amount of help that is out there at our disposal if we reach out for it.
Yeah, and I think part of that too is that we're becoming such, when we're in this industry, we become service oriented, or people have a service heart. So there's a lot of times that we're just leaning on each other during these times. Like, oh, I understand this part. Let me explain it to you, or let me teach you. And then it's that reciprocal. Oh, well, I hear something else that you could use down the road. So I think there's that give and take, that sense of community now that we're seeing. When we're looking at the business, the small business owner, because we realize we can't do it on our own. And so there's really been that reaching out of, here, let me help you. Here, let me see what the community can do for you. Here, let me share my expertise. Because, we're at a time where we have to lean on each other.
Very
we
much.
can't do it on our own anymore.
And I think I don't think I have a Pollyanna outlook on life, but I'm thinking through the COVID, I have said, this is such an amazing time for us to grow, and to really, really understand that we're not even equipped to do it all by ourselves.
No. No, and I even took this time during the, being locked at home for a while. I was certified as an integrative holistic coach because I just realized that as I'm helping individuals with their money, it's so much more. And so having that guide, having that coaching background now, I can see, the dollars, the numbers, but I can also see behind the numbers what's really driving somebody, because I like to say it's never about the money. There's always something behind it. And so now I took the time, since we had, the opportunity to be home, it's, well, how can I grow myself? How can I grow to help my clients? And so, yeah, I totally took advantage of that and this ability to grow during this time.
Very good. Well, I think many of us have, or are still in the process of doing
it. Exactly.
Well, and I've really enjoyed getting to meet you. It's always so fun to meet the one behind the words that are on the printed page.
Yes.
And to really capture the essence in a whole different way of the wisdom that you're here to serve with. Yep. And what you're bringing to the world. And thank you for bringing your wisdom to the world in the way you have.
Oh, thank you. And thanks for helping us in this journey. It's been a blast. So thank you.
It's a lot of learning. So for those that have been watching this, I got to keep going.
I know.
Those that have been watching, be sure and pick up your copy. There is such a wealth of wisdom, so many different viewpoints from 9 people from very different walks of life coming together to share their wisdom and their heart with the world. And this is an invaluable book to have in your hands. So thank you, Anne, for being here with us today.
Thank you, Becky.
All right. End our broadcast.